better or for worse, crime shows have forever changed the way juries approach their jobs. I'm not talking about true crime shows like this one. I'm talking about those dramas, you know, what we used to call police procedurals, Law and Order and all that, forensic files and CSIS, I think they call it. I don't watch them, funny enough. I like the true stuff. But they all toss around lingo and they show off the latest great tech. They generally solve cases in an hour or less, right down to the micromolecular level. They do this for crime, what doctors do for illness, but with one big difference. Patients do not decide whether a tumor is benign or not, or whether the rash is contagious. Jurors, on the other hand, they do. They've got the power. They are plucked from the public with no legal education. They very much decide whether someone's guilty and sometimes whether someone will be executed for it. And when it comes to evidence and proof and reasonable doubt, 21st century jurors have come to expect some pretty big things, high expectations. They hate loose ends and unconnected dots and statistical probabilities. And to those modern day arbiters of guilt or innocence, I say this hour is for you. Tonight, we are all about that one show-stopping piece of evidence that catches the defendant dead to rights. It's best known as the smoking gun. Could be a gun, but more often it's a photo or some video, text messages or emails, cell phone data, or Google searches or DNA. The Bryan Kohberger trial coming up fast in Idaho has all of these things, minus an actual gun. But its smoking gun may very well be the DNA. The state says Kohberger's DNA is on the snap of the knife sheath, which was found next to Maddie Mogan's body. The defense has tried every which way to undermine the process that led to that conclusion, and failing that, to keep the findings as far away from the courtroom as possible. But for now, at least it is the heart of the prosecution's case. And for obvious reasons, right? You know who knows this better than anyone else I know? My NewsNation colleague, Bryan Entin. Bryan, I know that literally up until this moment you have been going through these court docs, and I think you're still going through them. So there may be more shoes to drop. But let's start with what we know, and let's just start with that K-bar knife because, you know, I felt like the biggest moment in this case was that they found the knife sheath, and then the second biggest moment was that they figured out DNA on the snap, that little spot here on the knife sheath, the thing that snaps it shut. That's where that little tiny speck of DNA was, and that it matched Bryan Kohberger. But now we have him in court documents from Amazon buying a K-bar knife, a sheath, and a sharpener.
Yeah, more than 100 pages of court documents came out just within the last couple of hours, and this was buried in the documents. And you mentioned it. I mean, this is a massive deal. This is a huge, huge piece of evidence, something very, very helpful to the prosecution. They are saying that between March 20th and March 30th of 2022, so that would be about 8 months before the murders happened, that Bryan Kohberger, through his Amazon account, bought the K-bar knife, bought the sheath, and also bought a sharpener.
So what I thought was also interesting, and I may be, you know, superimposing my thoughts over their documents here, but it felt to me that the prosecution was making its case by saying we did not cherry pick. We didn't cherry pick anything. What we did was we found a purchase of what was a murder weapon, similar to a murder weapon and a sheath. And also, we looked at other activity, and never did he seem to be a hunter. Never did he seem to be a fisherman buying this stuff all the time. It seemed to be just this one time that he bought this kind of weapon.
Yeah, they looked at all of the activity, all of the Amazon activity for several different time periods leading up to the murders. And what's interesting is the way we found this out is there's these filings going back and forth between the defense and the prosecution, because the defense is trying to get a lot of this Amazon information and Amazon activity thrown out. Obviously, I mean, now we know why. It's damning to Bryan Kohberger. So they've been saying, hey, the state is cherry picking, some of this stuff shouldn't be included. And in those filings back and forth, that's where this massive tidbit was, right, buried in the documents, that Bryan Kohberger had bought the knife sheath on Amazon.
sure will be interested to find out what his answers are to where is that knife that you proudly bought. It wasn't in any of, well, we don't know, but I didn't see it on a manifest of any of the search warrants at his apartment or in Pennsylvania. I didn't see a K-bar knife, a knife sharpener, or a knife sheath in anything that they were able to seize from all the places that they searched of his. So it would be interesting if this had nothing to do with anything, then where's your precious K-bar knife that you spent all that money on, on Amazon back in March? And he, better have a pretty good answer for that. Let me jump to that selfie. It just sent chills down my spine to see him showered up and giving the thumbs up and being super proud, looking freshly washed right in front of the shower. And this was exactly at, was it 10:39, that photograph that was taken?
10:31 a.m.
10:31.
November 13th. So the day of the murders. The murders happened sometime around 4 a.m. This is 10:31 a.m. I was looking at it really closely. It looks like maybe he's in the bathroom, like in front of a shower, if you look closely. And this was just sort of buried in these new court documents. We haven't really seen photos of him like this before, but they recovered this photo from his phone. And the reason that the prosecution is so interested in this photo is because of roommate Dylan's account that he had, that whoever came into their home had bushy eyebrows. That was one of the main things that she said. So this is apparently the photo closest to that time period of when the murders happened. And the prosecution wants to use this photo at trial to show the jury so they can look at this picture for themselves and decide whether or not, he's got bushy eyebrows.
In November of 2022, when Kaylee Gonzalez, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were murdered, Bryan Kohberger lived just across the border in Washington state, about 20 minutes away. His home state, where he returned after the killings and where he was arrested a few weeks later, is Pennsylvania. Both his student apartment and family home were searched. And of course, among the potential evidence that police took away from that family home were criminology books, an ID card inside a glove box that was inside a glove that was inside a box, a silver flashlight, multiple items of black clothing, a pair of black and white sneakers, and the rubber gloves that Kohberger was wearing while sorting his family's garbage in the middle of the night, I may add. In Washington, when police raided his student apartment, investigators seized, among other things, stained bedding, strands of what appeared to be hair, and a single glove. And none of that screams smoking gun. But smoking guns aren't always obvious, at least not to the non-experts. Fortunately, Brian Entin ran all of this past two of the smartest experts I know. Robin Dreeke is a retired FBI special agent and the former head of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. And Katie Cherkasky is a criminal defense attorney and former federal prosecutor. And here's what they had to say.
Robin, I want to start with you. You heard me list out all of those items, everything we know, and it's come in bits and pieces, so it's interesting to lay it all out like that. Obviously, a lot we still don't know, but based on that, what do you make of Kohberger's criminal profile at this point?
He always strikes me from the very first time he was arrested that here's an individual that has studied this from books, and he has taken all his knowledge from research and no practical experience. And so it looks like he put together this project of his, and he gave himself an assignment for murder. And so that's what all this evidence looks like, is that he accumulated all these things, and the things he executed in the murder, like they can't find the murder weapon or the clothes he was actually wearing, he disposed of those because that's what the book said to do. Everything else that he accumulated, he held on to, maybe to be disposed of later or to be used in the future. But it strikes me as someone really conducting an experiment of an assignment he gave himself.
Yeah, interesting. And he had that survey at one point, which was like an experiment in its own way. Robin, what do you make of, and I'm sort of fascinated by this, the book that they took and some significance to page 118. What do you think that could mean?
That can be absolutely anything, because, and you said it earlier on, when they have the search warrant, they can't seize everything. They got to have a reasonable connection from the seizing agent's perspective of something that could be tied to the crime. And so if you have a book that is used in his field of study, it could be used and highlighted for something he was researching for school. It could also be something he's actually referencing for something he's trying to conduct in his life. It makes it challenging for a search team because it could have a lot of overlap, which is a little unusual, but it could be either or.
And it's something, like you said, it has to be relevant. At least they have to think it's relevant to the murder investigation. So that's why I'm so fascinated by that. I wonder what it is. Katie,
Yeah,
what do you make of all of this? What are you honing in on when we list out all of the evidence? And as a defense attorney, I mean, it just seems like this guy is getting harder and harder to defend with all of this stuff that continues to come out.
Well, that's absolutely the case. And I think if I was his defense attorney, I would tell him, and again, I believe in the presumption of innocence here, but if he has any hope of avoiding the death penalty, I think that he needs to take a plea deal and express remorse as soon as possible. Any defense attorney is going to look at evidence that ceased and determine if there was any sort of issue with a search warrant, because it does have to be proper under the law. There were some pretextual stops here, the traffic stops that are a bit questionable in terms of whether they had proper basis to stop him and collect evidence of DNA that they then use to supplement their affidavits to get these other items. So any defense attorney is going to try to see if there's any way to keep some of this evidence out. If they can't, then the next thing you have to do is try to present any other reasonable explanation for why you might have things that seem suspicious, like gloves, black clothing, etc., but maybe have an innocent explanation of some sort. But in this case, with the circumstantial evidence mounting against him and all the physical evidence at that, I don't know that there's much fight to be had for the underlying crime.
It's interesting, Katie, you bring up plea deal to avoid the death penalty, but with all of this evidence and one family at least already saying that they want the death penalty, and it seems, at least from what we know, that the prosecution has somewhat of a pretty solid case, why would they even be considering a plea deal? I mean, do you think they would even consider it, Katie?
Well, in terms of a plea deal, I'm not necessarily saying that they would agree to that. It's more a matter of Kohberger trying to mitigate his ultimate sentence, because if he pleads guilty, whether he has a deal or not, there still has to be a determination as to whether he gets the death penalty. And if he expresses remorse and there's more of an explanation up front, then that's going to probably be his best shot to avoid the death penalty if that's his goal in all of this. That's not necessarily a deal. It's just a decision to plead guilty, what they call a naked plea, essentially, without any protection, but to do so to get some sort of potential benefit, some sort of leniency in terms of sentencing.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.